Alright, okay, good evening everyone. Okay, welcome to today's session. Um, good to have you guys back, for the new week. We did see some volatility coming into the markets on the dollar, okay, as of earlier today. So definitely we'll talk a little bit about that. And of course, moving forward, what will be the outlook, okay? Yeah, last week was pretty good week. We did manage to capitalize on some of the move in the market. There are a total of three trades that were involved in, right? One of it is silver, which managed to hit our full target. Pound dollar as well managed to hit our full targets. And of course, dollar yen. I was stop out in terms of the trailing stops, right? So kind of didn't hit a full target, but still managed to capitalize on like a +1 hour, right? Out of that trade as well. And of course, today we did see that the dollar actually strengthened quite a bit, right? So I think it's also an important aspect to understand how to manage your trade as it goes. Okay. Uh, good. So cool. Okay, so just quick check. I think everything is working fine. Yeah. So if let's say there's any problem with the technical issues, because yeah, just let me know in the chat, right? But I think right now should be fine. I'm just seeing that there's an error pop up, but I think overall, yeah, should be fine. I think overall. Okay, good. So let's get started by taking a look at the week over here. Okay. So first, let's talk about the dollar index. Okay. Yeah. So I see Dylan and Irene is here. Good evening. Okay. So dollar index. What I'm looking at here, overall, it's still essentially bearish. Okay, in a way. We did see this momentum kick in, right? But personally, I feel that overall, even if this goes up a little bit, tag the liquidity at the top here. Uh, I am personally still more inclined to look at the downside, okay, which expecting price to actually retest the slope, right? So obviously, with today's push up here, carrying that momentum, we might get potentially some sort of a short term opportunity to the upside. Okay, and of course, with dollar strengthening, then that opens up some short term opportunities in the major as well. Okay, so we'll take a look at that. Okay, so this week's primary expectation is short term push up, take out the highs, and then from there we then switch our direction. Okay, so if you take a look at the euro, we are currently in this consolidation phase. Okay, we have this invalidation level here, but of course, if I take that out, this entire area here can essentially be the liquidity areas that the market may come back down and even test it another time, right? So if we can put this here, this entire zone. So I would be a little bit cautious on this. If I would want to ride on the dollar strength, I wouldn't be looking at the euro dollar, but more of like potentially other major pairs, right? Because euro dollar can see on the overall perspective is essentially a range bound environment right now, right? So I'm not too keen to really focus on short term selling this, right? But if you take a look at pound, okay, with this recent move, right? Of course, with all the, dollar strength, all the majors are doing that. If I were to update this a little bit, we are opening up the possibility where this can turn for pound dollar into a three-wave development that looks something like that, right? Now, the tricky part, of course, right now is has price actually completed this move entirely and we start to see the bounce, or is this just the internal first wave, and then if we see a corrective move that looks something like that, we can then expect one more push down. Okay, so that's something that we'll need to keep track and see how price is going to continue to develop from here on, right? But personally, between the euro dollar and the pound dollar, I'm more inclined to put in a little bit more effort to really keep track of this, right? Now, if I bring it down to the lower time frame, that's the trade that managed to hit our full target. Very nice, exited, then the market came down today. So if I kind of remove that and take a look at moving forward, the short-term sell that we kind of talk about, we do have the market taking out this high, right, which is where the liquidity sweep is. Obviously, we also have this high here acting as that, right? And the market obviously came down with huge momentum, taking out that swing low, right? So moving forward, okay, as I mentioned, if we can get some sort of a corrective pullback, okay, that would open up a sell side opportunity, given if we can get a corrective pullback. Okay, so this is something we'll keep track on for this week and really see how price is going to develop. Now, the alternate opportunity to get involved in this is price just continue to crawl lower, okay, without really doing a corrective pullback, and it just starts to move lower, but in a corrective fashion, right? Then what we'll do is we'll not be so interested in selling it anymore, but what we'll be looking at is a first pop, and then we'll look for upside from there. Okay, so we need to kind of be adaptive to what the market is developing, and of course, adapt our perspective to what the market is essentially telling us in terms of like the patterns that is developing. Okay, so that's on the pound. Then of course we have the Aussie, which I'm just gonna continue maintaining a neutral point of view. There is that huge possibility again this can develop into a huge channel structure, right? Especially with this kind of move here, and then we get this first impulsive move. So to be honest, this is another pair that I would say it's worth looking into for the short-term sell, right? So far this invalidation remains intact, and of course if you go down to the lower time frame here, okay, just remove everything. We do have the conditions of a setup, right? You can see that highs are being taken out, and of course this swing lows have been taken out with momentum as well. There's some other block here. So yeah, I mean, this one going into tomorrow, if price starts to show signs of pulling back, this is the swing low, then obviously we can start measuring our fips, and that is definitely an opportunity we can look to sell this down. Okay, yeah, so keep a lookout on this two pair, pound dollar as well as the Aussie dollar, right? Going into this week, I think that's where the opportunity can arise. Then next up in the list is dollar Canadian. I'm still neutral on this. Okay, price actually came very, very close to the key level. It did not really tag it, but if it would have tagged it and start bouncing, that would be perfect, because that would give us that extra confidence in saying that, all right, that's the sweep, that's a fake break, and then this would start to go higher. We did not get that, right? So this one here, I'm just gonna be just a little bit more patient, okay, and really give time and see how price is going to develop from here on first, right? So dollar CAD, I'm just going to leave it. Okay, dollar yen coming back up very, very impulsive. I would say this is more or less the same as euro dollar, right? You're probably just going to be patient right now, or even dollar index, you're just going to be patient right now and see if price is going to like take out that high first. Okay, so dollar yen, we're just going to be patient. I just very, very quickly talk about dollar yen trade, right? So you can see that this was a tag, right? Very nicely moving into our targets. Came very, very close. At this point in time, I actually shift my stops to this level, right? 147.25. And then I was tagged out over here, right? Kind of update you guys in the email as well. And of course, some of you may have been holding it, depending on how aggressive you manage, right? But different traders were slightly different ways of managing. So I actually decided to shift it here because it came very close to target. but didn't tank, right? Then of course this hits my trading stop. Basically got out with, you know, about close to 1:1 if you minus off like swap fees and things like that. Okay, so yeah, that's the importance of it, because if you did not, then obviously you will give back a lot of profits from the market, right? So usually a good time to consider shifting your stops to break even, right? So the first step, obviously, management of trades is to remove your risk, right? So when is a good time to shift stops to break even is always when either of this actually occur, right? To me, if the market react off impulsively away from our entry, that's a good sign, right? Because we do not want the market to pop back up into our entry anyway. So actually, at this point in time, for this context and this particular trade, okay, is that if price actually tag, or I would say if price actually came down like that, tag us in, came down like this impulsively, this is a good time to shift stops to break even already. Okay, that's usually one sign I'm looking out for. The other sign that is a good time to shift your stops to break even is when your risk to reward ratio is close to 1:1, right? That would also be a good time to shift your stops to break even. Then you just manage accordingly in terms of how aggressive you want to trail it. Okay. Yeah, so that's a very quick one just to talk about the trade that we had last week. Okay. But this week here, I think dollar yen really nothing much, right? Just probably gonna leave it aside. Then next up, of course, gold. Breaking all-time high again. You know, a lot of people will get excited about that. But my take is still the same, right? This is an impulsive move. You don't buy at the top, wait for a corrective pullback, look to buy at the bottom after the pullback occurs, right? So nothing much on this, right? I think the direction is quite clear, it's bullish, but we just need to wait for the pullback. Okay. Silver, we had a very nice little trade last week. You know, I got out with my full target. Didn't really extend my targets, but for those of you who did, great. You know, I think the precious metal overall, it's just gonna be bullish, right? If you ask me, is there still room for silver to go? Definitely, right? Definitely. So very quickly, if I kind of bring you to the silver trade, okay, it's slightly different from the usual setups, right? And I think this is a good opportunity to talk about this as well, right? This is where we entered, okay? Now you realize that there's no like liquidity sweep prior to this entry, right? But what we have is a very clear structure, right? A bullish structure. And this trade that I took on silver and kind of share with you guys is really what we call a trend continuation. Okay, so our typical setup looks something like that for a buy, right? We want to see some sort of a sweep, some sort of a change in direction. We want to see momentum move, and then the pullback we enter. This kind of setup usually occurs when on the high time frame the market is retracing, and then we look for the end of the retracement to jump in on the trade, right? So we play around with multiple time frames. Silver entry here, you can see we don't have that, but basically why is because this has happened previously, right? That's your liquidity, that's your shift, right? So when we are looking at this on the H1, which is this time frame we are looking at, we don't need that sweep anymore because the sweep has previously happened there. Okay, so that's my thought process when I kind of decide to take on this trade here, right? And then you can see that's where the entry is. Very quickly hits our target. Obviously, if I, you know, kind of I would say did not just take the entire position out of it here, and you continue to trail it, you know, yeah, as of now, if you're gonna shift your stops to maybe somewhere there or here, you would have gained like way more, right? Potentially. Okay. But that's the idea on it, right? I have another portfolio that I'm invested in GLD, which is gold ETF. That's definitely the long term. Silver here, I'm looking at shorter term, right? So I'm happy to just hit my target and get out, and that's about it, right? So this week here, very similar to gold. I think this week the market will likely do a pullback. So unlikely we're gonna get involved in any buy as of today or even this week, because this week if it's gonna pull back, then it's gonna build into that setup, and the setup will come to us only like probably next week. Okay, so these two commodities probably you just put it aside. Then we have crude oil. So crude oil is developing in terms of the direction as expected, right? We're expecting this to pull back towards the zone here. It's just that we don't really get a clear setup that we can participate in this pullback, right? So I'm just gonna be patient. You can see for crude oil has been quite a bit of time, right? But as we start to approach our key level, okay, as of now, let's just take away the 618, focus on the 50. If we start to see something sort of like that, right, where you have this high here, you have the Fibonacci 50%, if we start to see some sort of a setup that looks like that, we can start to consider selling it back to these areas, right? So we'll see. Probably not within the week as well, so commodity side of things probably will need to just be patient on it. Okay. S&P 500 coming down pretty impulsively, not something that I would say is ideal. To be honest, we do have a setup here which gets very, very close to our entry, right? Not the best kind of pullback, right? So we need to observe this particular trade, right? It's a pending order, so if price tags us in, okay, we want to ideally see some sort of an impulsive bounce, okay? So good opportunity to talk about trade management. Now, if you got tag in and let's say price does give us some sort of a reaction, but this reaction looks like this, okay, what I'll do is I'll just get out at break even, and then we'll look at it another time, right? The reason is because on a high time frame, this is coming down pretty impulsively, right? So understanding a little bit about potential Elliott wave patterns, okay? What pattern can this develop into is potentially an expanding flat structure, okay? And if this can potentially turn into an expanding flat structure, it will very, very likely come and retest this low. Okay, so there is that possibility this would happen, something like that. All right, and then from there, maybe it will pops to the upside. Okay, so with this possibility in mind, and of course with price coming down pretty impulsively, not the most ideal situation. I mean, if you're not very comfortable with it, you might want to just cancel your pending order. But just bear in mind that there's no certainty in trading, right? It's all about probability. Okay, can this actually do a V-shaped bound? Absolutely. Right. Obviously, if it's a V-shaped bound, great. This trade works out very well. We'll then, of course, consider shifting stops to break even, and we do expect this to continue higher. Okay. So there are a couple of scenarios in terms of like trade management, right? That's the V-shaped bounce. If this just goes something like that, look to exit. Okay, with whatever minimum profits or break even. In the situation if this just goes down like that, obviously hit our stop, then it's part of it as well, right? That's why you have our invalidation, we have our stop loss in place. Okay, so we'll see how this continue to go forward. Of course, by tomorrow we probably would have some updates in terms of like what pattern it's developing, and then I'll share with you my thoughts on this particular trade as well. Okay, next up we have the pound yen. Has been taking its time to develop. So far it's in a range. I'm still basically expecting this to pull back. Okay, I would love for price to come into the key area before we look for the opportunity to buy, right? Which means that we want to see it come down, form some sort of a setup, and then we'll look to buy to the upside. All right, so a very, very simple pattern of an impulse correction. Okay, just be patient on this. Aussie yen, bullish overall, I would say. Okay, price seems to be taking out that top channel, but same thing here. You don't want to be buying at the top. Always wait for the pullback, and then we'll look to buy. Right, so this needs time. Okay, so you don't need to rush things through. Pound Australia, we were expecting that downside, did not really get the pullback that we like to see first, so we continue to just be patient, just ignore the previous drawings. We'll want to wait for some sort of a decent pullback, then we'll look to sell, right? So if you can't update, this would be our current invalidation. Okay, and then we just wait for it. Again, this week unlikely this is gonna develop into something. Okay. Bitcoin testing our key area. Okay. Now if you go down to a lower time frame, you're gonna see a setup, but it's not a high probability setup to me because we did not get an impulsive move yet. Okay, ideally we want to see some sort of an impulsive push to the upside. Okay, so what I mean by that would be ideally something like this, right? If I'll kind of like take the candle, okay, you want to see some sort of a movement like that. Okay, if we can get something like that, it indicates to us that there's a good chance this is the bottom, and then it's a good time to look for the buy. If you don't get that, there's no trade on BTC. Okay, you want to be very cautious on this because this can easily just develop into some sort of a corrective and then continuation to the downside. Okay, yeah, just be careful on this because again, when it breaks all-time high, it gets a lot of people excited, and you can see that it reverses pretty sharply, right? So I think Bitcoin here, again, going higher time frame on the daily, right? Is there upside opportunity? Yes, right? But you always want to be, you don't need to buy the very, very bottom. You don't need to sell the very, very top, right? But the thing here is if price hasn't given us a clue that this pullback is completed, you just want to be cautious because what happens is this can obviously go down, take out this low, and then only bounce, right? Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So you can see previously, I mean, quite similar in a way if you take a look at this, right? Can you see that pattern structure, right? It breaks that high briefly, reverses all the way, take out this low, and then only goes back up. Okay, it breaks the high briefly, kind of map it here, right? There's a good chance this can actually break all the way back down, and then after that reverses. Okay, it may not happen exactly the same, but you can see how characteristics of previously this instruments, how it can actually happen in the future here as well, right? Very, very similar to that. Yeah, so in a way, okay, you might even want to look out for this area here at 98,000. Okay. Yeah, so that's my take on Bitcoin. Okay, so in a way, this week, as of now, okay, we don't really kind of have a lot of things on our table. I would say like the major pass, potentially something there. Yeah, dollar is still essentially moving down quite impulsively, right? Right, so I would say this two would be likely the ones that we can look out for this week. And then of course, depending on how price, for other pairs continue to develop, we'll need to keep track of it. Good. Okay, so S&P, I think we just got tagged in, right? So we'll then observe how this is going to react off our entry. Okay, and we'll give it until tomorrow morning, and I'll update you guys along the way. Good. Any questions or any particular instruments that you'd like me to talk about from here? Pound Australia, I think Pound Australia, we did talk about that just now. Essentially, I'm waiting for a pullback. Okay. If we get a pullback, then I'll look to sell. Okay, but this is gonna take some time, right? So the context of time is basically, if you take a look, right, I mean, we are on a 4 hour, okay? So you're gonna roughly know, okay, here, date range, right? You're gonna roughly know, right, if according to this drawing here, right, how long it's gonna be, right? So this you can see is about 9 days, right? Obviously 9 days if you take away your weekends, so we have about 10 trading days in 2 weeks, right? So 9 days over here is essentially close to 2 weeks. Okay, so usually this will give you some sort of expectation that this week unlikely the pullback is going to complete, right? The earliest possible kind of like time expectation that this would complete is maybe next week, where on Thursday or Friday, if it's going to be happening, that's where you get your setup. Okay, so this is what I call time expectation, and this allows you to kind of focus on things that would likely give you a setup, and those that doesn't, you just put it aside, right? So you don't need to kind of keep focusing and keep looking at it when there's really nothing there. Okay, so GBP AUD is this week here. Really, I'm not gonna spend too much time on that. Okay, Nikkei 225. So yep, let's take a look at that. Should have it here. Okay, I don't have it. Let me just open up the chart. Okay, let me just pick this. Okay, from a CFD point of view. Okay, I think overall structure on this from a 4-hour time frame perspective, essentially it's still bullish. Okay, as long as of course this swing low holds. Nikkei 225 is in a bullish structure, right? In terms of like FIB levels, if you take from swing low to swing high, okay, I mean it's testing the 50% already, so you probably want to look out for the 618, right? So I think this area here is the key level to expect some sort of a bounce, right? So if today you want to buy, obviously this is the time to start looking out for a setup. In the lower time frame, you can get some sort of a fake break to the downside, liquidity sweep, change of character with momentum push, and of course the pullback opens up the buy trade opportunity. This looks corrective for now. Okay, so I think overall it's still bullish. Probably not going to be so keen in looking at the short-term sell, right? It's like there's not a lot of room to look for to the downside, right? You want to focus more on the outside from here on. Right, so that's on the Nikkei side of things. Euro New Zealand. Okay, let's see. Okay, this one here, right? Couple of details that we can talk about, right? Which share with you my thought process and what I'm thinking. Okay, so price is currently here, right? So what I'm looking at is how did price arrive at this point, right? It came from this low and then it came from this high. Then I always ask a question on like how price actually developed, right? You can see that from this high to this low, it's very, very corrective in nature, right? In a way, meaning there's a lot of overlapping move, there's no momentum. From this low to that high, that's a momentum move. Okay. So if today the momentum is to the upside and the pullback is very, very corrective, oftentimes it suggests that after this pullback phase, the market will continue going higher. Okay, so that is usually the first thing would establish, which means obviously right now I'm a little bit more on the bullish side, right? However, it doesn't mean that we're gonna buy immediately, right? The thing here is then, how do we know if this correction is completed and price is ready to go higher, right? So the first clue is obviously this part, okay, where today if you look at this low to this high, we don't really see that momentum push yet, right? So what is a momentum push? Something like that would be ideal, right? But we did not really get this. Instead, we get this, right, which is very, very corrective to the upside. So again, then that gives you a clue where there is the possibility that this is a push down, this is a push up, which is a retracement only of this push. And then there's a good possibility this will go back down first, right, to complete a typical three wave move from Elliott wave perspective. Okay, so you can see how I start to derive into this conclusion, right? Now, will price always develop into what I expect? No, right? Again, there's no certainty, but this gives me an expectation where this would likely develop first, and therefore I would be patient in buying, right? Now, will I sell here? Probably not, because this move is corrective. Okay, now I give you example that you can do a comparison within the same instrument. Okay, now you can see here we have this impulsive leg, we have this pullback, right? Now this is something we can capitalize on, where I would potentially look for opportunities to sell this move. It's the same expectation of a three wave, right? 1 2 3, 1 2 3. I will look to sell this here in the short term, but I will not do it for this one here at the moment. Why? Because the difference is that this is a momentum push, this is not a momentum push, right? So that's that comparison. Okay, so sometimes you realize I look to trade the short term, right? Meaning we trade the pullback, we trade the retracement, but sometimes we don't. Okay, the key difference is how did price move, right? Did it move off with momentum? Then we can look to short term trade it to the downside. If it doesn't, then we don't. Okay, so yeah, Euro Kiwi here is a good opportunity to really dive into, you know, my thought process, where I share with you, you know, this would likely, if this continue corrective, this would likely come back down first. Maybe take out this low coming into this area here, then we'll look for a setup, right, to buy it back up. Okay, now obviously if price comes down here, we won't be selling it, right? We'll be looking at, do I get a reversal where I can then look to buy the continuation of this trend. Okay, so that's the thought process on Euro New Zealand. Right, I mean, it's not only Euro New Zealand as a whole, but you know, this explanation basically is the thought process that I go through in all, you know, the trades and all the instruments that I look into, obviously. Okay, so I hope that helps. Good. Cool. Yeah. So that's really about it for today. Okay, I think dollar is really strengthening quite a bit, right? So this will build up this two pairs, but obviously not today. We'll see how things move going into tomorrow. If you need a little bit more time, obviously we won't force anything by tomorrow, right? Okay, S&P still basically bouncing there. We'll see, right? Gonna keep you guys updated as things continue to develop as of today. Right. So that's all from me for today's session. All the best for this week. We'll see how things go. Okay. So from a swing trade perspective, we're not gonna get trades every other day, but you know, on the typical week, we get 2 to 3, which is great, right? We're not looking at like going in and out of markets very, very frequently, but we're looking at like more towards capitalizing on some of the major moves, right? Good. Yeah, so that's all the best, and I will see you guys next